2 years, I guess. End
Oh
of
yeah.
2019 was when I came. So
Did you get citizenship or what? How did you do that?
no, no, I'm just on a student visa. I'm taking my yoga instructor training.
Oh wow.
Um,
Cool.
but at first, I was on just visitors visas um, for a bit there. So
Oh wow. Very cool. I'm gonna try to break in there one day. They'll let me. If they'll let
yeah,
me out of here, then I got to worry about getting let in there. But I think everything is what the soul's got to be free, and if we're actually doing this, and I don't see how that can't. The human body can't follow that suit. But we'll see. I'm gonna give it a couple. I'm gonna give it about another minute. We got 8 people in here, but I can try
cool.
to tag you on this if you want me to.
Yes,
Let's
please. Yeah, that'd
see.
be lovely.
I tried to tag you on the announcement and it ended up going to I don't know who same name, but it was not you. And then I tried to do
Oh,
you. Let me try it again now. Let's see. A
and
and
so where are you? You're in
I'm
Australia.
in
Yeah?
no, I'm in the US.
Ah,
Yeah.
wild.
So there's a bunch of them. Let's see. Okay. Naomi Kennedy's all over the place. Yeah, I tagged somebody and I went to go check to see it was the right tag and it looked like a bot. It looked like one of those
Mm,
sex, fake,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I
So
don't,
if you put Naomi Kennedy Art Epiphany,
art.
that'll lead to my page, and then
Here it
hopefully
is.
we'll.
I got it.
Okay,
Naomi
beautiful.
Kennedy Art Epiphany. Yeah, I got it. Done. Done. Okay. All right. We're at the 2 minute mark. So I don't know what that was. So, yeah, I've been a little bit off today. And not in the shape you're in, but it's been a lot of energy coming down. All right.
Mm, mm.
So this is one of my favorite things to do on this show. I think we're over 3,300 episodes now, and I love getting to know people in front of everybody, and just doing it spontaneously, intuitively, creatively, imaginatively, and courageously, depending on what we're talking about, and just getting to know people and expanding awareness of your energy and what you're into and what you're doing, what your story is. That's our big thing here is real time intel being whatever that may be. Um, be it channeling, downloads, transmissions, or human interaction, or the energy's coming down, or I have COVID, or whatever the case is, or just what's happening. Because it seems like the most beneficial code sharing we can do is in the given moment. Just showing up and putting it out there, no matter how we feel. I know you're not feeling too well. I'm not
Yeah,
too far behind you.
yeah.
So I love to ask people. I have a feeling if you answered the ad, you probably hadn't seen the post she put up in that bulletin board. You probably hadn't seen our show, but I love to ask people when I first meet them. Have you always been this weird, or did you have a wake up experience?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I've definitely always been this weird.
Okay.
When I was a kid, people were like, "You're weird. You're weird." And yeah, I've always been like aware of like other beings, believed in the fae, believed in mythology, was conscious that um, mythology wasn't completely accurate, that things had been distorted, and yeah, and was always quite bizarre. Like when I was quite small, my family talked a lot about dreams, and there was meditations that my mother would do, and
Really?
yeah, so she would put them on because I was quite hyperactive.
Hmm.
And so she would put them on for me to try and get me to go to sleep. And a lot of the times when I would go to sleep, when things were tumultuous, I would imagine that I was rocking on a boat. And then I would also imagine that I was spinning. And recently, someone was saying that as a child, what I was doing was I was connecting into source so that I could find a center of universal love, and that I didn't fully believe that humans could.
Hmm.
I knew dogs could, and so I also did a lot of shape shifting as a child into different animals, kind of disassociating in a certain way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I quite enjoyed turning into a wolf and stalking the other girls at brownies and things like
Yeah. Okay, this is going to be great. We got a lot to unpack just in what little bit you said. I'm
that.
interested. Well, so we'll just kind of back up a second. Then I want to jump into the elementals in the face a little bit. Your understanding and your connection. But so ever since you were little, you could see uh, what we might call non-physical
Yeah.
energy or entities.
Yes.
Did it give you any scares, or were you always kind of at home with them?
Yeah. Well, I never seen anything scary. It was unicorns. It was, um, the gnomes, and I had really vivid dreaming, and so I imagined that I like at one point, I felt like I had a large sea turtle in my living room. And I would just, yeah, pretend that I would become little birds. So yeah, I wasn't scared of it whatsoever. My aunt also traveled with the psychic fair, and so I'd pop in and visit her, and she had crystals and a lot of explanations
Oh
about a variety
wow!
of things. But there was no yeah, there was nothing to be scared of really.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I obsessively worked out,
Hmm.
and I had this like sensation that I had to be strong, that I had to survive, that I had a purpose, and that all the tumultuous stuff that was happening within the family was for a reason, and that I had to be strong. So I was really intense on physically working out and practicing with sticks as swords, and so very much had this like warrior intensity come through me that um, and the other world wasn't scary. The physical world was scary. So that's where
Mm.
I was more, but I just folded into super intense. Like I remember telling my stepmom that that if I was lost in the woods, that I would survive. And she was like, "Oh yeah, that's nice." And then I was like, "I would eat these flowers, and I would eat tadpoles, and I was like, I told her all these things
Like
that
you
I would
knew
do."
these things already.
Yeah, well, I just had this sense, like when I was probably about 3, I watched an animal documentary on a lioness who had lost her cubs. And so when she was bellowing for her cubs and looking for them and searching for them in this forlorn grief, I just burst into tears, and I just had this awareness that I had been her, that I had been that
Wow.
lioness, and that I had lost my cubs in a prior life. And I just had this sense of knowing of other lives, not just as human, um, right from very young. Um, yeah, so I just yeah was
Very
a
cool.
very bizarre, obsessed with animals. I wanted to save everyone, everything, but mostly the animals,
Right.
and save the planet from the time I was small. So
So yeah, I'd like to dive into that a little bit. I'm really interested. I've always been more connected to the nature, which to me would be like the nature beings, the rock beings, water, anything that's nature from the human perspective. Not that the cosmos didn't offer some mystery and intrigue, but as time has gone on, especially this year, I just feel more and more of their presence. But I'm just curious because you kind of exude that which you're speaking of, which is like a lot of people, not to say a lot of people, some people come on here and they're very galactic. They
mm,
even some will. I'll see them change, and we've had some weird things happen on the show that other people have actually observed as well. Do you have any type of because it's obvious your connection and your energy exudes elemental and nature, animal kingdom, and such. But do you have any? Have you had any experiences as far as what you've been sensitive to that might be considered galactic or maybe even angelic?
yeah, yeah. So I work with Archangel Michael pretty primarily. Like that's the primary angel that I'll work with and call in. Usually just utilizing candles and whatnot. I was hesitant to go through what I know as the sixth seal. So in the teachings that I've come across, there's 9 seals,
Okay.
and the sixth seal is alien contact. And I found a lot of people that had galactic contact ungrounded, a little bit spun, not human. So I took my time
Mm.
exploring that. And recently, as of about 2 years ago, I came across a Maori mentor. And so with the Maori, they have very specific connections to the Palladians.
Right.
And they're very particular, the way that you go up into the 12 heavens, the way that you approach, who the guardians are, who the extraterrestrials are, who the celestials are, who's the masculine, who's the feminine, their names, how to connect to them. And so that was really beautiful. And I felt very safe, very connected, and very, yeah, very grounded through the process of connecting to the extraterrestrials and the celestials and the guardians of the 12 heavens. So I work a lot with the Palladians,
Wow.
and I find some people find them a little pretentious, but I prefer the neatness and the tightness of the way that you interact with them. And they're very particular, and I quite enjoy that.
Mm.
As for a lot of the knowledge about the star systems are pretty open, and I find that a lot of people turn a mic and then say like all Andromedans, and I'm like, I wouldn't ask all humans on the planet. Not every human on the planet is great. And so some of the aliens, I do a process called Echidna Dream Time, and that's removing interdimensional activity that's negatively affecting the running of the vehicle here today.
Mm.
And aliens are sneaky, the most obnoxious. They do implants. They like my first encounter with one of them in a drum journey process. I encased it. It was quite a large, distorted being, and so I encased it, and then it cut open in the backside, and out came this really beautiful looking woman. And she was like, "Oh, okay, I'll just go now." And then my guides were like, "Take her to the healing waters." And I was like, "Why? Like, she's got no bruising. She's not dirty. She looks pretty great." And she's like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm good. I'll just go." And my guides were like, "Don't let her go. Take her to the healing waters." And I was like, "Oh, okay. And so I took her over there, and she was really nervous, and she didn't want to go. And I was very confused because normally when you need the healing waters, they look it. You can see that they have damage. There's pain. But when I took her to the healing waters, as soon as I dipped her in, the whole outfit of this beautiful woman split open, and out came this multi-armed, pretty gnarly looking thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like, "Oh!" And then they were like, "Welcome to aliens." And I was like, "Ah!" And I was like, well, "These buggers are like, no wonder I took so long to be willing to interact with them because, yeah, some of them they're very sneaky."
Mm.
And I think some people, when they say they're talking to God, because aliens can lie. As for demons, elementals, things from this planet, they can't. So if you ask them directly, they have to answer. But aliens don't because they're
Mm.
not of the earth. So they're not bound by earth things. So if you ask them, "Are you God?" they can say yes because you might not have defined in yourself who God is. And so they can, and yeah, so aliens I find interesting. So I don't mind interacting, but I'm still very hesitant um,
Right. Interesting.
about being too scattered with interaction with them.
Well,
And then
to say
they're
it
really
again.
good at
Go ahead.
implants. They love putting
Oh yeah.
implants in,
Yeah.
and I'm not a fan of implants.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. Yeah, because I tend to question everything.
Hmm.
Certain things you don't. I mean, because you just know. When you have that
Hmm.
full body, or I should say plural, full bodies kind of sensitivity going. You just know. But yeah, especially early on in my let's just say reawakening, I had some things happen, and then as things progressed, then I realized kind of what you're talking about. I would kind of maybe say it a different way, and that I just the thing that I noticed was that you would think that if something, or at least I did, as you start to jump into the astral and other dimensional kind of things, that they got everything put together, or that they don't have agenda. That's another thing.
Hmm.
And I learned that within the first couple of years because of some things I caught him in, basically. But yeah, that's interesting. This thing that you're talking about, this what you studied with the 9 seals, what is that? Was that something you came across, or something that you just?
So that came across, I believe it's a book called Dancing the Spiral by Jamie Sams.
Hmm.
It was a number of years ago. So it's Indigenous teachings from Turtle Island. So I believe she's Cheyenne and
Hmm.
Scottish.
Wow.
And so she discusses the 9 seals, um, which is, yeah, everyone goes through the first 3 seals. It doesn't matter. One, two, three, three, two, one. Everyone goes through the first three of spirituality. The fifth seal has to do with like when you have such a following that you start to elevate in your capacity. So people believe you can do hands-on healings. You do hands-on healings,
Right.
but each of the seals has a trap. And so the fifth seal's trap is that you stop realizing that you're the channel and you think, I'm God. And so most cult leaders, that's the fifth seal trap. They have stopped, they've gotten such an expansion of capacity because humans can expand like someone to the point of a God. Um, Hence why you see a lot of evangelical Christianity. They do miracles,
Mm-hmm.
but they control their collective consciousness so that they can do that.
Very
And so
interesting.
it's when you have this mass of collective consciousness believing
Yes.
that you can do something, that then it expands, and that capacity is there. But the fifth seal issue is that you forget that you're the channel and you start, I am God, I
Yeah.
am the, and you see the distortion happen there.
That's
I
a
can't remember exactly all the seals,
yeah.
but those are the two that I really quite
Well, that fifth one's
just.
interesting. That fifth one's interesting because obviously, I mean, I grew up in the South, and first of all, I saw it in my first year, probably the first 10 years, being exposed to the Catholic Church. Even though it wasn't one single person, I guess ultimately it was the Pope, and then well, down to the bishops locally and the priests, and so it wasn't so much one person, but that collective consciousness giving, I would say, like giving up their power to
Mhm.
that element, which I guess would operate no different as an individual when you really think about it. But then later on, as I saw in the southern U.S., the fundamental Baptist, fundamental Western Christianity, Protestant, and yeah, you see those evangelical types. You see the healings. Pentecostals, I mean, they basically do light language. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff there. But another place I've seen it, which has really kind of come to the forefront. I don't think I'm the only one. Has been in the what we call the light worker starseed communities,
Mhm.
where I want to say like in late 2019, just through doing the show and interacting with people and just kind of reading the field of the people that create this vortex every time we're doing this, uh, started to see a shift from like a yogi guru type of paradigm to a self empowerment paradigm. A lot of the practitioners would come on and talk about I'm dropping my modalities. Every session I do is basically custom.
Mhm.
Kind of you could kind of see where they're. I don't mean to say this in making light of anybody or their journeys, but I just noticed this as observer where they maybe took themselves a little less seriously, had their own uh, reoccurrence of say dark nights of the soul, learning experiences, initiations, and such. But I still, and what I've seen is like it's not sticking like it used to. Um, I'm not. You've got some things that were um, very helpful. I'd say platforms, people, processes that were very helpful and necessary and part of our evolution. Total respect, honor, reverence. But that we've kind of changed. I mean, things are shifting, and people are finding their own guru within themselves. I guess is one way to put it. But I still see some uh, evidence of what you're talking about, which is very interesting. The way that you brought this up or brought it to my attention, because there is this element. I've always wondered about this, where you have a group that sends their consciousness or connects their consciousness to, let's say, an individual like you're speaking of, and that is a pretty powerful force no different than like a major download. And, I was Mother Mary in a past life, and it challenges my ego, and I lose sight of the fact that I am the channel, like you said,
Hmm.
versus the conduit versus, oh, this is actually me doing this.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I've noticed that. Have you noticed that? Are you very active online in these types of communities?
Yeah. So what I've noticed for myself, like, is that there's been so I've collected a lot of modalities. Some of them quite masculine, have quite a distinct process, this kind of thing, very linear process. And I'm actually going a little backwards because I'm actually taking yoga training now,
Mm.
and it is very like rigid process to get to attain channeling and to attain the meditation seated whatnot. But I have moved more into medical intuitive, and so like I have my about 6 modalities that I do, and what I'll do is called a polar dip. And so then when someone comes in though to do like weekly or monthly sessions of pretty much everything I do, I just drop in and channel, and then sometimes which it is the modality that we need to use today, and then sometimes like last week one session I did, it rolled from a kid in a dream time into a past life redemption into a shamanic removal, and it was it was very different from the way that I normally do things, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? Okay. Um, and I think what we're seeing though is more of a feminine, because the masculine's that linear process,
Hmm.
and then the feminine is that flow, and we've
There
been
you
in
go.
a very masculine, very linear, honoring the masculine process, and even some of the ways that they're showcasing the feminine is still in masculine.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing, I think, is that awakening of if you were very linear, then you're going to move into the more cross pollination of the feminine. And eventually, I think we're going to move into the tantric aspect of things, which is that there's the 3 nadis. You have your masculine and your feminine, and then you have your third nadi that's in the middle, which is your queer space, your androgynous, and your in betweener. And in the yogic teachings, Tantra, so like Buddhism is a masculine path. They say that to become enlightened, you have to reincarnate as a male. Krishna and the Hare Krishna path is a feminine path, and you are a receptive. You become a gopi, and you are penetrated by Krishna, and it's a feminine path. And they say that it's best to be born back as a gopi or a female to be receptive to Krishna fully. But the tantric path is that there is both of the paths, a masculine and feminine, a Shiva and a Shakti, and that you rotate on the in between point, the axis and the central axis, raising the Kundalini
Hmm.
up, and then they meet in the crown chakra, and then that's where them coming together, Shiva and Shakti, awaken the crown chakra. And Shiva um, is the forest god. He refuses to be in the city. And that's why they bring him Shakti, because he refuses to leave the forest. And even when he marries her, he still refuses to leave the forest. And so it's about that wild, divine masculine, and being woke so that he does move. He gets woke by the feminine. Otherwise, he's sitting there meditating, and he
Hmm.
refuses. And he's like, I'm not going to help you guys. I'm not going to help the gods. Like, they're like, we need help. Shiva, you're the great destroyer, the great conceptualizer. And he's like, meh, I'm meditating in the woods. But then they bring Shakti, and she awakens him. And
Right.
because of his love for her and her love for humanity, then he arrives and assists. And so it's about awakening the divine protector, but it's also awakening the divine feminine and she who's compassionate, and blending the two. And we see a ton of people doing Kundalini activations, curious how to do that. And so we're coming into this as much as, yeah, some people it's moving into this more feminine path. Um, but we're seeing, in my notion, is we're coming to awaken both,
Right.
depending on where you are. And then it's about the blend and awakening the Kundalini so we can, um, yeah, really fully experience the balance of what it is to be here.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Even to me, I mean, even thinking about it, I mean, obviously, over the years doing this show, I've run into to some souls that were I want to say purely feminine, but they were vast majority of their energy was feminine, very
Hmm.
soft. But most of us, I think, were imprinted pretty to a pretty great degree by this patriarchal, which I guess when you get right down to it is the suppression of the feminine
Hmm.
and a distortion of the masculine. And it's interesting watching that play out in both men and women. Um,
Yeah.
but I like the way you describe it because even when you put it into terms of like being a practitioner and the things you've observed and experienced, because um, it goes that deep. And that makes sense. I've never thought about that. That is what is occurring. I see it in other things. I see it in the world. I see it in relationships. I see it, in the workplace. I see it, in the last couple of years, especially with this whole COVID thing, and the energy that's brought, and the potential that's opened up in us. But to examine it at that level, in what we might call spirituality, which is probably an overused term, uh, you're right. This is exactly what's happened. The rigidness has kind of gone away. The humans kind of getting more out of the way, and the intuitives taking over, are taking its proper place. Let's put it that way. To form that, what is that? The caduceus, to form
Yeah,
that.
Lucius,
Yeah,
yeah, the two serpents up
yeah.
the spinal
Yes,
column.
so that's really interesting to look at it that way because it fits. Now, one of the things that's intrigued me as time's gone on, especially this year, just through personal experience, and again, like I said, I've always had more of a natural connection to the earth, I guess. And we spend so much time in these circles talking about the cosmos, talking about the planets, talking about the star family. Uh, and sometimes, we forget what's right in front of our face. And so the elemental kingdom, the nature beings, nature as we know it from the human perspective, uh, it seems to be speaking louder and louder and louder in synchronicities. I'm hearing animals like I've never heard them before. I talked to a chorus of cats the other day that was totally,
Hmm.
totally cool. Like it was totally just like I've never had an experience like that. I've heard animals, birds in particular, certainly gotten signs from them and nonverbal communication, but this was just like a little choir of cats, and I'm like, well, what's happening? But then I understood everything is expanding. It's not just us, right? Do you feel like that there's an uptick in our communication with elementals, both in the animal kingdom that we see, as well as the fays, the elves, the unicorns, and such?
Well, I think that we stopped listening. And so our ears are slowly unplugging. They always talk to us, they
Mm,
constantly are trying to communicate with us, and we're the ones that closed our ears to
yeah.
them. But those spaces, those places, so in the middle world, in my teachings, so we've got, the underworld, we've got the middle world, and then there's the upper realm. But in the middle world is where collective consciousness creates bubbles. And like the whole world, it's either called, can be known as inertia or the ethers. And so Jesus's story, because everybody puts this, has a big section there. Mary Magdalene, big section. So when you become ungrounded, you can crash into these and physically experience everything, and thus sometimes get confused and think that it's you. Up there as well, though, is all these different cultures, times, groups, communities that worshipped. And so our Fey worship, our memories that we could fly, the memories that we can teleport, the memories that we do speak to the animals and shapeshift to the animals, are in these pockets up there as well. But it's also where, yeah, they're always trying to communicate with us. We're the ones that became so damaged, so dense, and stopped listening. Domesticated,
Mm-hmm.
we've domesticated chickens. Current chickens, a hawk flies over. Domesticated chickens don't run away. As for heritage chickens, as soon as they see a shadow of a hawk, they run into the coop. So we've had that happen with us as well. We've been bred down to not respond to certain communications, certain notifications, and then we've also had our beings slaughtered and moved. So when in Mongolian teachings they say that our soul splits into three parts, and that your top part has your face on it. So Egyptians also have this as the ka, and it flies into the tree of life as with a bird body. The middle section of your soul goes into a place in nature, and the bottom section of your soul goes into the underworld. Both the underworld section and the upper world section can incarnate back in chunks of bodies at different points. So that's where you can meet someone and you're like, you're me, but you're not me. But it's because they were the bottom half of you at one life and you were the top half of them.
Mm.
That middle point goes into a place in nature. And so then when you go to those places in nature that your ancestors used to wander, then you could hear your ancestors.
Right.
You could hear the beings and the supernaturals that they worshipped. We were punished for worshiping our supernaturals. So there's a fear about connecting to the Fae. 400 years of witch burnings was a long time, and persecution of that. Then the other thing that we see with colonization is they deforest and move our creeks. So you see that even currently, up north, they moved an entire lake. And then all of a sudden, all these caribou and birds were still going to where that lake was. And so they do things like that as a purposeful action so we don't hear our ancestors and we don't remember them. So Scottish, Irish, English, most people haven't been in the States for more than 500 years, but you are taught to cut all of that off and just be nuclear family. You, your children, that's it. Not even a generation back at this point anymore. We stick our old ones into homes. As for
Mm-hmm.
traditional England, like a generation ago, you knew 9 generations back. And throughout Europe, you knew your family line, you knew your power, your identity, which makes you have an empowerment of your truth, of your blood, and not feel shamed, disturbed, uncomfortable, and grasp at straws to find your identity. Oh, I'm American. Oh, I'm Australian. Oh, I'm Canadian. And the rest of that, it's too painful, so I'm not even going to look at it. Because we do have a lot of trauma, European trauma, if we look, not very deep. It was 500 years. And then if we look, at some of the stuff that has gone on because oppression set up, where we did persecute and distort and hurt the indigenous when we landed in spaces, then it makes a person feel disgusted and shameful about their heritage, and they don't want to look at that. So it keeps you shallow. And then what ends up happening is sacred sexuality is not practiced. Sex
Right.
magic has been demonized. And then the other thing that happens is we end up connecting up to the stars. We connect our up in, and then we circle down, and then we come to a shallow point, and we run it through the hara, the base part of the body, and we don't actually ground down to the earth. And it's one of the distortions that happens. I find like connecting to the stars is great, but we're here to bring star energy to the earth, and we're here to bring earth energy to the stars. That's why
Yeah.
we stand up. Um,
Yeah. That's my
and
point. That's my point. That's you articulated that for me, because that's what I'm seeing. It's like, okay, and I've always like Morgan since I met her, and I didn't know a lot about galactic. I had certain impressions and this and that, but she was really the first person I got to know. To me, very Pleiadian. Not that that's her limitation, but just very galactic. Her intuitive, her downloads. Mine was very different. Mine was very organic from the Earth perspective. And so that's been an interesting polarity to watch dance back and forth. But as time has gone on, I'm going, wait a minute. I'm getting information and have always got information from, for instance, red-tailed hawks were really big for me. Other animals in and out, not so much to a species, but just individual animals would come at certain times and giving messages. Trees were really probably the biggest thing for me, are the biggest thing for me. Um, I can understand the language. I can't explain it to anybody. But so through all these shows and doing all these shows, hearing, well, not taking anything away from, because all of the universe is me. And, but, you see over the years, this kind of like, what do you call it when you send an email to everybody, like 100 people, and it's the same email? But it's like, the Arcturian said, the Pleiadian said, the Andromedan said, and then it gives this forecast of what's going on, and hang on a little bit longer, and we're watching you, and it just kind of like made me numb to it. Not that I haven't seen some really strong galactic channels, and even had some of my own connections, and certainly with Morgan. But what about the elementals? And what about the animal kingdom? And what about the
Yeah.
nature beings? They're right here with us. And what about inner Earth?
Yeah.
That's always been a really strong pull for me. And it feels to me like that it's getting louder and it's getting louder. Are you seeing anything in your own experience through your connectivity? Are you seeing, I don't know, a louder message or clearer message coming from let's just say the earth-based energies, be they inner earth, be they, on the surface and such, elementals, dragons, unicorns, that type of thing? Are you hearing more from them over these
Oh,
last couple of years?
really loud. I've noticed that there's been a lot of dragon riders and a lot of people waking the dragons. So the teachings that I came across from the mystery school that I was initiated in speak of how traditionally, druidically, we were given two snakes. Then we put the snakes in a pit for 7 years and fed them nothing but milk and honey. Traditionally, we used to literally pour milk and honey into the earth, but it means the pituitary gland and the pineal gland secreting it is the milk and honey. And then after 7 years, your snakes would turn into dragons, and they would eat nothing but crystallized rock salt. And we see crystallized. Oh, and then you could ride your dragons across the land. So there was these images of druids literally with two snakes like skis flying across the land on these dragons. I love the Nagas. I love the dragons. And I do a lot of study the world over. In Laos currently there is so when I was in Thailand, I was looking for the head of a giant serpent that I would dream of. So I had these dreams since about 2000. I used to always dream of snakes, tons and tons of snakes, very strange, but often coming out of the water. And then at one point I started to dream of the tip of this very large snake, and I would pull on it, and then I would start going up it, and it would be extremely wide. And then I got really nervous because I did have a dog, and I got this knowing that when I found the head of the snake, my dog would die. And so I'd get nervous in my dream about finding the head of the snake. Then in 2017, I traveled to Thailand looking for the Nagas. And while I was there, I was doing meditation every day, and I had some very beautiful synchronicities, prophecies, seeing things coming through. And I found the head of the snake. Right at the very last day that I was there, I found this woman that had a complete shop of just the Nagas. Because the Nagas are at every temple there, and I was like, "Who are the Nagas? What are the Nagas?" And they're like, "Nagas helped Buddha attain enlightenment on Saturday." They're the cobras. They circle under Buddha as he's sitting, because like Thursday he goes to the river, he almost attains enlightenment. And then his internal demon comes up, and the demons try, so he has to call on the Earth Mother to help him defeat the demon. Then Earth Mother gives him shit, and she's like, "Buddha, you got stuff to work out. You cannot attain enlightenment with all this garbage inside of you." So then Friday, Buddha stands in reflective posture. So Friday is actually meant for deep reflection. And Buddha left a wife, pregnant, and a child. And he left a very fancy life so that he could experience the world. Then Saturday, he goes back to the river because he's like, "I almost attained enlightenment by the river, so I'll go back there like I did on Thursday, sit in Thursday's posture, see what happens." But the monsoon rains start coming, and he's beginning to attain enlightenment, and out come these cobras, the Nagas. And they're like, "What's Buddha doing?" And then they're like, "Holy shit, Buddha's going to make a pathway for all of us to easily be able to go up." And they're like, "Oh, this is good." So then the cobras coil under Buddha, and then they open their hoods, and on Saturday Buddha attains enlightenment with the assistance of the Nagas. So that's all I could find. But then the last day I was there, I found this tiny little dinky little shop in this mall that was being renovated. They were literally open, even though they were like dust and sanding. And I was like, don't think, depending on where you were, this would be legally allowed, like the amount of dust and stuff that was in the construction zone that was this mall. But in there was this one tiny, tiny little shop, and it was all Nagas. And this woman, her and I had this choppy communication, and she was just like, and she's like, "You, heart of the Naga, heart of the Naga." And she gave me this little tiny little red gem, and she was like, "Heart of the Naga." She's like, "You." Mm-hmm. And then she like gave me some postcards, and she was just floored, like just looking at me and the few of the things I shared. She was just like, "Oh," she's like, "You, Naga, Naga, heart of Naga." Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then she explained to me that if I'm looking for Nagas, I have to go to Laos. And that the Nagas traveled from Europe, and it took them 3 days, which by human time was more like 300 to 400 years. It took them, they used to be worshipped in Europe. They came from the West. They didn't originally be in the East. But if you have sex with a Naga, your child is born with snakes for hair. So the Gorgon sisters, Medusa, banished to the land of the cliffside with the golden apple. The Nagas chased the dragons out of Europe. Martha the Great slaughtered the red dragon of France with nothing but water and the pages of a holy book. So the Nagas left because of the getting chasing the snakes out of Ireland. The Druids were known as snakes. There's no physical snakes in Ireland. The Ice Age didn't go back up, that like didn't subside off of there while snakes were moving around. So Ireland literally doesn't have snakes. England does, but Ireland doesn't. So chasing the snakes out of Ireland is actually the Druids.
Well, I didn't know
And
that.
any which way, yeah. So and then in Laos there is a river there, and they have the Naga festival. It happens in March, and it's the quietest festival. It's very, very colorful, but everybody goes to this river and begins to meditate to help the Nagas blow fireballs, because Nagas actually blow fireballs in deep meditation space, and they start off as green and red serpentine beings, dragon-like beings, and then they move into white and gold as they mature. And then when everybody comes and sits and meditates during this festival, literal physical fireballs shoot out of the river 30 feet into the air. There's hypothesis of, it's the fermentation of the leaves at this time of the year, and blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah.
when
But
that
all the people,
happens, right?
Nagas, this is Nagas. I think like, with the galactic stuff, like, yes, there's messages we need, but I also think it's like kind of like easy. It's a disassociation process
Yeah,
of going out, and it's also like, ooh, this like fancy, the stars, but like we need to attend to the earth. And I think that everybody and anybody will get the balance that they need, though, to become the conduit of the star and the earth. So you finding Morgan that brings the galactic stuff to you is so that you earth stuff to her, and then you both can come into balance with
exactly,
what it is that you're here to bring. And
exactly. Yeah,
yeah, so I
that's it.
think that not necessarily do I see a rise of it. um, I constantly am encouraging the roots and decolonizing and coming to love the power that you once were and the way that we traditionally worshipped, and finding the medicine of your hybridization at this point. Um, and I find that it's painful. And that's where a lot of people don't want to look at, what did my family do? What are the things? And that's where it's easier to just go to the aliens. I'm from the stars. I don't have to take responsibility for any of the shameful things that my family has done,
Yeah,
any trauma that has been caused to the animals, to the trees, working in the oil industry, working in the mining companies. My family made a fuck ton of money mining. Oh, whatever. You know what? I'm not going to feel shame of that. I'm just going to connect to the stars. So I think that sometimes it does have a little bit of spiritual bypassing,
yeah,
because there's debilitating shame around what the family has done to that has harmed the earth.
yeah. And I think we forget, because I'm a big proponent of the human, um,
Mm.
but it's I really appreciate what you're saying about first two things. One that you said earlier, which because oftentimes too we disconnect from our, let's say, our blood lineage because we have had a lot of displacement in this community, in these communities since on or about 2012. Family thinking we're crazy, we're doing stuff, we're hearing voices, and we're changing our lives, and we're not fitting into the typical societal templates. Um, but I remember as a kid growing up in South Texas, which was predominantly, like say 60% Mexican American. Okay. And my family was Mexican American. My mother's family was Spanish, like fourth, I was like fourth or fifth generation, I think. And my father's family was Mexican. So there's a lot of cultural ethnicities within that, just within that in a short range, say going back a few generations. Um, but my grandfather was really, he was a really strong character, patriarchal character. And he was very proud of his heritage. And it ingrained in me until I left at about 10 years old and I went into another city in the northern part of Texas, which was primarily Anglo. Now I'm like one of five Mexicans in my whole high school, when I first started.
Yeah.
And so it became a different kind of thing. So when you were talking about, I guess in alluding like shame or, not wanting to disconnect from that, feeling different in not a good way. I kind of see the same pattern that you're talking about collectively. So I think that's pretty important. What you're saying, getting in touch with our recent past. Let's put it that way, because there is a lot to offer there. And then the other thing is, like I was saying, I'm a big proponent of the human. I call it the human hybrid soul, because what you're saying is, as we're disconnecting, and we've done this, we've all done this. Like, I don't want to be human. Beam me up, get me out of here. This is too hard or whatever. We kind of make it small. It's not prominent. It's not at a equal seat at the round table of the monad. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really appreciate about what you're saying is the fact that when we don't look at, let's say, the bad stuff or the less comfortable stuff, we can forget what we have to offer the universe, which is we're the boots on the ground. We're developing code in real time, code of transformation. We're universally seated in this earth. So there's so many different divergent energies. And there's a lot to be said for that. We're not just receiving, and you said this earlier, we're actually sending up code to our families of all types of species.
Yes.
And I think that's something that maybe we're starting to come into touch with because we are pretty extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing is like the teachings that I've come across is that this plane is not level 1. The Earth is like level 9. So we come together 617 soul parts and we're like, all right, I want to learn about loyalty. And then we go to the star constellations and they are universities of knowledge. And we study at different universities to prepare to come down to planet Earth.
There you go.
Then we down, we drink from the river of amnesia because our soul goes nuts waiting for the horse, the horse I call it, to grow. And there's been 2 people that came down completely conscious and they were like, rah, waiting for the baby body to actually be able to speak, walk. We don't get our burst of gray matter till we're 14. Then our brain doesn't start to prune till we're about 24. We don't have a reflective process. There's certain things that we just have to wait for the human body to be able to handle the soul's purpose. So one teaching that I come across is that we have 4 bodies. We have our physical body, and then the soul comes and lays from the base of the skull down the spine. And then we have our nature diva higher self, and then we have our soul's higher self. So a lot of people will ask the higher self for stuff, but they forget that actually we're a human. And so if you want physical manifestation stuff, you have to talk to your nature diva higher self to get that stuff. You don't ask your soul's higher self for that stuff. You ask, if you want physical things, you talk to your nature diva higher self. Then when we come down here though, and we're riding around, the horse has its trauma, its ancestral stuff. And so the soul's like, all right, let's go this way. And then the horse like rides past a neighbor and is like, that bastard got us 2 years ago. Go get him. And flares up. And it's like, whoa, what the heck's going on here? Like, why are we reacting like this? Why am I having this relationship over here? But that's because the horse has stuff to work out. But the soul can help it by moving it through this higher consciousness, getting past life redemption done, doing this, that, the other. But there is these playouts that the horse will do. This plane is the only place that the soul can get bigger or smaller. When we come along, we keep, 617 soul parts don't fit into one human body. In my understanding, they split into 13 human bodies. But then also in my awareness, I think we also go into animal bodies and tree beings. And so that way we can we connect up into ourself, and we can have consciousness memories of the different animals that we are. But then when we get really clear, there's this thing called Pashupatu, which means you can go up and then you drop into the animal body. And we used to hunt that way. We used to hunt through big cat bodies and things like this. And that's why cats retrieve, is because there's this memory of when we used to go up and then into a cat body. We started to assassinate from that option. So that's one of the reasons why Pashupatu became less known about and severely damaged, because and why they went for large predators for spaces, because we used to be able to get into our predators and then come as the wolves, come as the jaguars. You want to fuck with us, we'll come as a big ass beast and cat then. So these kind of things. But when we go along, we've got two options. We can make a black hole if we make the dark choices, or we can become a star, and which is the enlightenment. Right. Universal I don't care. Needs both of them. Doesn't give no shits. You decide. Hence free will. Right? You can do what you want while you're down here, but it's your choice, right? Then if we go towards enlightenment though, and say we wanted to explore loyalty, well, that means we have to know deception, because this is a polarized plane. So it's a contrast of knowing thyself by thy contrast. So then when we attain enlightenment, though, we become a star and we go up, and a star is born in a constellation. And then traditionally, we used to put antlers on to connect to the universal knowledge of the stars. We used to put the horns on to connect to the lunar knowledge. And then we'd put a pointed hat, a stupa or a dupa, which we see stupid, dumb, and the dunce hat is the demonization of the use of the stupa or the dupa, the pointed hat, to connect to source. So then we put the antlers on though, and at certain points, kaboom, into the stars. Get that knowledge from that university. So when we go to speak to star beings and things like that, you're just going to talk to the profs and the people that are hanging out in that university. Some of those universities created some pretty gnarly things for power dynamics. So, that's where I'm a big one of, is this of the light? Is this for me? And I work for the light. So, and I work for the other check-in point that I utilize is, do you work for the holy, compassionate, divine? Because for the most compassionate action for all involved. Because I believe in healing can be rough and it can be brutal. And that's where I always ask, is this of the light? Do you work for the holy, compassionate, divine and the most compassionate action for all involved? Because I want it to be as compassionate as it can be as we all adjust. Because sometimes it can be good for one person, but it means it bashes someone out of the way to open that door. Because the universal eye, it doesn't know. They're looking at the planet and it's like pickup sticks. Because at one point I got mad and I was like, "Murd, God, murd, universal eye, why wouldn't you?" And they're like, well, the thing is that like consciousness connects with the planet, then it draws up, and then there's a blueprint, but then at a certain point there's this grid that is expected, and so if the universal eye comes in and just, oh, well, that sucks, and pulls something out, it's like pickup sticks, and they're like, we don't know what the reaction of killing a butterfly down here will be to you guys. So once the grid structure and the consciousness that has put in its blueprint to attempt at this planet of what's going to be, it's up to it to make those decisions, and the universal structure can assist in a certain way. But that's where we have to ask. We have to ask the angels. We have to ask very directly, and then they can assist, because otherwise they don't know, because they're not having the human experience.
Exactly. Exactly. How would you describe the nature diva higher self? Is that what you called it? How would you describe that? And like, how do you, what are the differentiations between that and, let's say, what we're more familiar with in terms of higher self?
So as far as higher self goes, like my understanding is like for the higher self, for the souls, there's like your inner healer, inner warrior, inner sovereign, inner this, inner that, that all have their different kind of archetypal forms. A nature diva higher self is your heritage, and it's your bloods kind of going. So you with the augury that naturally happens with the hawk, lots of people had connections to the birds. We know that Mexico has the eagle grabbing the snake was where they decided to put their city, things like this. So having that connection to the hawk, the higher sight, the messages. So the nature diva higher self is like your elemental form.
Okay, gotcha.
So
So it
yeah,
kind of follows suit with what you were talking about with the underworld, middle world, and upper world in a
mm-hmm,
way. In a
mm-hmm.
way, I mean, the three, the formation of the three, or the Trinity again.
Yeah.
Which is a big. And let me ask you this: I'm curious because you're obviously very well read, well studied, and a great job, by the way, dedication
Thank
for
you.
aligning with your purpose and continuing at it. It's so nice to see so many people that are continuing to expand and not flatlining. But there's so many different narratives, right? I mean, I look at everything as a potential program, including ascension. Uh, uh, I just know somewhere there's a common ground that we all meet, and truth is there's one truth, or however you want to put it. But aside from that, what's your take on what's happening on the earth when you take in everything into consideration that to include, let's just say, the three planes or the three parts of us, or however you want to put it? What's your take on what's happening? What are we doing, and where are we headed?
Mm. So the seed of life. Uh, you familiar with the image of the seed of life? Um, I think I've got an earring that has it on it. So this is a big question, um, but I've thought about this lots. So
Oh yeah, yeah,
the seed of life,
yeah.
and so these are our dimensions, the little points between. So right now we started a dimension about 3,600,000 years ago. It expands, which means interdimensional beings also expand, and a variety of species have been developed. And then now we're coming down to one of these pinch points. And these pinch points is where the world starts to get small and it twists. And the frequency of the pattern of the earth is circle, square, circle, square, circle, square. We started off very small and we expand out from here. Right now, we're outside of the frequency of phi, and when we're outside of the frequency of phi, we're destructive and we create bridges. We can also destroy ourselves completely, but this is just part of what the planet does. Then, when we expand into the frequency of phi, we're going to become 13-foot beings, and we'll go back into Christos consciousness, as some people know it, where we live in Eden. Um, so, we're at one of these funky little pinch points right now, and it means that the world gets small. So there is a vying for bodies, there's a vying for space, both on this plane and through the interdimensional beings. So about 1200, in my understanding, was when some groups of humans started to make deals with interdimensional beings about, hey, we'll give you some bodies if you give us some of this, that, and the other for control and indoctrination. Because People know about this prophecy of what's happening. It's just, it happens. One of the times that the earth did it, she killed off 95% of the life on the planet. Another time that the planet did it, 85% of life on the planet. So we're seeing the fires, the floods, we're seeing the COVID, we're seeing all sorts of things happening. But it's because we're at one of these pinch points. By human design, we have another 5 years to be set in an upswing of positivity. We don't have to be perfect, but we have to be on patterns of positivity because it's going to be locked in. And then whatever way we're rolling, then it's going to go. So we've got another 5 years. Right when I heard about that teaching, COVID hit. I also was at the activation of the Rainbow Serpent at Uluru on January 12th, and was there, and that's the activation of the solar plexus. So right now we're at the solar plexus, and there's a wall before we break through the heart. So the planet is the Rainbow Serpent rolls, and she's of the realm of fire and relationship, and she rolls anybody that isn't being good for community. So activating her, she went up through Bali and then into China, which is where then we seen first COVID hit, and then it rolls around the world. And she traveled, as far as I know, around the world, which was that you're being too greedy, you're not treating the world properly. Go to your room and think about it. So her activation has not been done in over 300 years because it's only done when people are not being community minded. And this prophecy is coming about where it's going to lock the patterns in very soon of what we're doing. So there is a vying for bodies. The ancestral trauma of about 3,000 years of genocides, things like this, is actually essential. And so what's happening is that when we heal right now, we're cutting into this 3,000 years of trauma. And then we're in the forge right now, hammering out purple. Purple is attained knowledge through suffering. So purple is hard to get, but because of the ancestral trauma, we're actually mining out and have this capacity of this large amount of purple right now. So we're in the forge. It's super intense. We go to heal a little bit, and all of a sudden we cut like butter, and we're like, rah! But it's because we're doing this tons of ancestral trauma. But all of a sudden we're coming out the other side with ginormous purple swords and purple helmets, and it's epic. And it has never been on the planet like this before. But it's needed for us to cross through this point. Because there is some of us that would prefer to just destroy the planet, and there is other beings that want bodies, and they're only allowed human bodies if the human throws the body away. Hence why Christianity says suicide is bad. It's true, because when you throw the body away, then an interdimensional being incarnates back in your body, because the horse will continue to come as the soul's purpose is desired, but other interdimensional beings aren't allowed to have bodies, and there is a lot of middle world beings. So this is where we see the celestials and the terrestrials helping. There's a lot of push blasts for us to move forward at this time. We have to clear our ancestral trauma. Coming up to the solar plexus, we've seen the whole thing with the vax, the us, them, know thyself by thy boundary. But the point of that is not to get stuck in the solar plexus and punch each other all up till Sunday. It's to focus on spirit and break through the heart. Then when we break through the heart, there's a period of madness. We fight our internal demons, but then we come to understand ourself and our truth. But then we have to go back to tribal tantrum, because tribe has the patterns that we've always done. And you've got to stand in, I love me, I love you. That's why if you think you're enlightened, go back and visit your parents. Because patterns. Yeah. Then you come to your relationships, then you come to your work, then you come back to your heart, you start living your passion, you start speaking, opening up the throat. There's another wall at the third eye. And so then you got to focus your spirit again. You got to focus. Then you break through here, and there's another period of madness. And it's where you, I know everything. I see the understand it. The universe. And that's where it's really important to do the lower chakras first. Otherwise, you can forget about the human, and you can pass. Because you won't eat, you won't sleep, you won't, and you don't attend to the horse, and you don't attend to the body. So I think we're at a very, very intense time right now. I do a lot of battle in the other world, and I am quite compassionate. I heal the beings up to the highest, and there is a war going on, but it got started a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought that they kicked our ass and killed us and were doing great, but actually they benefited us by the amount of trauma that they gave us, because when we heal now, we can get this crazy amount of purple. And it was a whoops moment where they didn't expect that that's what was going to happen. But it actually benefits us.
Yeah.
So I think we're at
The
a
farther
really,
you go down, the higher you can go up.
yeah, totally. And it's about feeling, it's about being present with the human. It's about remembering that we're here to have a human experience.
Yeah.
And our soul's purpose is to bring star to earth and earth to star, and to enjoy pleasure, to enjoy pain, to enjoy loving community, and to experience the human experience so that we can become a star and contribute to radiating down to the planet for the ones to come.
Far out. Far out. I enjoyed this very much. Thank you for sharing with us and honoring us with your presence and being so open with us. And I hope you feel better. I know you will.
Yeah.
And it's a pleasure to meet you. And I look forward to collaborating with you again if you're open to it later in the year.
Yeah, definitely. I love chatting, and thank you for having me. Thank you for the interesting questions. And yeah, if you could tag me or send me a link to this so that I can make sure to also share it to my
Yeah.
community, it's really beautiful to. And then yeah, and then I can find you in the future for more of your talks and see who else you got going.
Right on. I tagged you on it, so it should be there. You might have to approve it, but it's there. Thank you so
Perfect.
much.
Yeah,
Have a
thank
good day in
you.
Brisbane, and
Yeah,
I'll see you when I see you. Thank you. I really
definitely.
enjoyed it.
But
Bye
yeah,
bye.
me too. Thank you.